Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Caddx Kangaroo micro camera. A 1000 TV line camera with a 2.1mm glass lens, super WDR, 4 milliseconds low latency. It has a plastic back featuring these two connectors. This one to connect your video signal to your flight controller and your power. And this one is for your OSD control board. It weighs just about 4.5 grams. It also comes with an adapter for wider mounting, which makes it weigh just over 5.25 grams. It comes with a control board to change the settings on your camera, a hex tool for screws, 3 different pairs of screws for mounting, and 2 screws for the back plate of the camera. First stop is our lens test, where I cover it with a dark washcloth and we see how it changes in the supreme or in the extreme light conditions where you put it directly in the sun. You cover it up and then you uncover it. I also point it down into the garage as I point it directly at the sun as well. Give you a little bit idea of what you're going to be able to see in those extreme light changes. And also then I go ahead and do the little test where I don't put the cover directly on the lens but just cover the sun from it, just to see if it responds differently or how differently that might be. On a different day than our lens test, you'll note that we don't see the OSD from the machine, and that is because on this rig, I am using the RunCam DVR. That's important to note, so that, you know, anything that it's doing to change how the image is viewed, we're seeing it here. I will say one thing, that in the goggles, it appears a little bit differently. It actually appears more sharpened, and that might not be a good thing for a few of you, so take a look, especially at those leaves on the trees. That's where I kind of noticed it the most. I do turn the sharpness down in another flight footage that I'll be showing you, but it's on a different day, so you'll notice that as well. The greens to me seem a little bit off as far as the actual or natural colors. You may like that for some reason, you may not. I think sometimes we have different requirements in our cameras and our image, especially the colors as they're represented. It could be in particular flying scenarios, especially if you're using any sort of additional camera that films in HD, that you may want something different than you might for myself. Because I do fly exclusively micros, I am oftentimes not only looking out this camera, but I am recording this for the footage that I show on the channel as well. So different requirements for different people, something to keep in mind. We do some low cruising around the neighborhood. You get to see all the different shapes and different things that we have. The trees, we fly in and out of the shadows. We have the red pickup. We had the red cooler in the garage. So I give you as many different variables to look at so that you can grade the camera to your liking. And we just kind of do our typical circles that I do. And we're also going to go up high. So I think this kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think going up high gives us the best idea of any fisheye that lenses might have. If you would like to see something different for fisheye testing, if it's something I can do, I'm more than willing to try that out. And then we circle back down to the ground for a few more loops around the neighborhood. Not necessarily gracious flying, but getting her done here. This particular machine that I am flying is I think it's called the Kraken from Tomo Quads. It's a micro, it's a 2.5 inch micro. I'm using RCX motors that are the 1304 5000 kV motors. Running 4S. Those are nice and smooth motors, but I will say one thing about the RCX motors. In my experience, they have apparently softer metal. When I bang them into something hard, I tend to bend a bell or damage the motor in some capacity. So while they're really nice performing, and in this case with these particular motors, they're very smooth, so it gives me the best possible chance to deliver smooth video for camera testing. If you're a basher, it's not necessarily the first one I would go to. One thing I think it does handle very, very well is especially that shot where I fly through all those trees where we have kind of spotty sunlight through the trees. I think it does a really good job of continually seeing through the shadows and into the bright areas pretty well. I won't say it's better than all the other cameras I've tested, but it's one of the positives that I noted as I was experiencing this camera, that when you're in the shadows or you're in the sunlight, you can see into those things fairly well. And so again, depending upon your flying environment, that may be a positive or a negative. We do an orbit around the tree here, and something that I liked about that was how well you could see the bark on the tree. It is a fairly large tree, so the bark is pretty sizable, but doing that little orbit gives us a good idea about the detail that the camera see in the bark lines. Now, as I said previously, I did think it was a bit sharper than I wanted to, and while I normally don't do this, I did turn the sharpness down 10 points, and I run another flight, and this is what we're going to look at next. So to my surprise, just changing the sharpness down 10 points didn't have that much of an effect. I expected to see a lot greater effect. 10 points isn't nothing. I think it was at 64. I turned it down to 54. When we go back to the desk and we take a look at all the different settings in the camera, you'll be able to see where it's at currently. So the default or first flight that we had was 10 points higher than this one. So we do some additional cruising around the, this is a different day. We do this cruising on a different day, so the lighting is a little bit different. I think it's actually more sunny, so it's something else to keep note. I actually changed the settings on the camera thinking I was going to have time to run right back out and do another flight, but family plans that I was not aware of came to play, and so I had to wait pretty much 4 or 5 days. Here's my neighbor, and he knew I was behind him. He's kind of crawling slowly. He's thinking I'm going to do something, and he's laughing. You can't hear him, but he's kind of laughing, and he gives us a little wave, and then I cruise up next to him. We've got really nice neighbors in our location, and it's really nice. And he's going to make a little face at us there. I think he does the whole waving of the fingers with 2 thumbs in his ears sort of thing, His name's Gary, if you wanted to know his name. He had hip replacement, I believe it was last year. He's doing pretty well. Good guy, good family. His kids are all grown and off in college and married and starting their own families. So I really appreciate having such nice neighbors. It's good to be kind of not just neighbors, but be a neighborhood. We oftentimes will spend some of the nicer evenings this time of year outside chatting as people are walking their dogs and stopping by for a chat just to catch up. And many of them, because their kids are so much older than ours, are oftentimes interested to see how they're doing because they've known them since they were babies or at the very least toddlers. But this is a flight. Again, I turn the sharpness down 10 degrees. Gives you an idea of what that impact will have on the image and how it's viewed, but I think that's probably quite enough flight footage to look at to get some sort of grading for yourself going there. Of course, there are many other settings that we can change in order to make the camera fit us if we choose to. This camera currently is showing up at Banggood for $27.99. It should be available many different vendors, and I'll point out some of those vendors down below. Let's jump back to the desk and we'll take a look at all the different settings that the camera does feature. So while I had planned to show you all the settings, unfortunately, I cannot get the OSD control to come back up. I've actually tried a couple of different Caddx control boards, some RunCam boards, some Foxhair boards. None of them activate the OSD anymore. The camera is still functional. It still shows an image. Why it doesn't bring up the OSD, I really don't know. It worked the last time I changed it. Obviously, I had not pre-recorded the settings. I was going to do that now. That's why when I did the narration, I mentioned going back and looking at all the settings, but my review will have to end without showing you those settings, unfortunately. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.